Good afternoon. Whoa, excuse me. Good afternoon. Please take your seats. Welcome to all of you, honored fellows, inductees, and guests. Thank you all so much for being here today. Je m'appelle Jay Cross et je suis le président de l'Académie canadienne des sciences de la santé. C'est pour moi un grand privilège d'accueillir aujourd'hui pour présenter nos nouveaux boursiers. Nous avons un événement similaire à Montréal au début septembre et nous aurons une autre cérémonie à la fin de novembre à Vancouver. Today is being live streamed, and I welcome those who are joining us online. For those of you online, the chat bar is not active, and so if you have comments or questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, which you're probably very familiar with. We're also happy to provide simultaneously interpretation for those of you joining us online, and so choose your language, again, at the bottom of the Zoom window, French or English. I would just start out by saying that induction into the Academy as a fellow is one of the highest honors a scholar in the health sciences can receive. It is incredibly special because fellows are nominated by their institutions and by their peers and selected by their peers through a rigorous and competitive process. Each fellow is chosen based on performance and impact, importantly impact of their work, internationally recognized leadership, scientific creativity, and also willingness to serve. And so those of you who are new fellows, we may be calling upon you if we haven't already. Before we begin the program, it is important for me and all of us to acknowledge that the land in which we gather is a traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial and have been stewards of the Ottawa River and its tributaries. And we are incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to be here and to do our work. In addition to the induction ceremony, which will happen in about an hour, we have three important guests this afternoon going into the evening to share their thoughts about the state of health in this country. And to begin, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the Honorable Senator Stan Kuchar. And I'll just make a few remarks about him. Senator Kuchar joins us today as an internationally recognized leader in the mental health of children and youth. He is a distinguished psychiatrist, professor emeritus from the Department of Psychiatry at Dalhousie University. He's pioneered research into the causes and treatments of youth suffering from serious mental health illnesses. His work has ranged from clinical research to medical education innovations, including helping deploy school mental health literacy programs and youth mental health care capacity, including programs within the primary healthcare system. He's published over 400 articles and authored numerous books on these topics. Given that, quite appropriately, Dr. Kuchar is a fellow of the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences, and we are honored to have him as a fellow, but now he is also a member of the Senate. Dr. Kuchar continues to advocate for better mental health outcomes for children and youth in that capacity. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Senator Stan Kuchar.
Thank you very much for that overly kind introduction. It's a privilege to be with you today, and would like to first congratulate all of the new inductees into this august body. So it's a measure of your success to date and a commitment to do some good work tomorrow. So welcome. It's really a privilege to be speaking to you as both a member of the Academy myself and as a senator. And I'd like to acknowledge the vital work that the Academy has done and continues to do in the development of evidence-based studies on the many topics that the Government of Canada has relied on to help inform the development of some, not all, some of its policies. And while this input is only one of the many different inputs that go into the crucible from which policy and legislation emerge, I want to assure you that all those parliamentarians with whom I have spoken about your reports are very appreciative of the high quality and take them all very seriously. So kudos to that work. I'm going to focus my remarks on the importance of best available evidence to support policy and legislation. And I will share some thoughts with you as how the Academy might be able to help with that. I'm going to begin my presentation with a case study, carefully chosen not to hit too close to home, but to hit home nonetheless. On June 2nd, 2020, Dr. Scott Rifkus, the Florida State Surgeon General, issued a public health advisory that stated in part, quote, "All individuals in Florida should wear face coverings in any setting where social distancing is not possible." He concluded that part of the advisory by saying all individuals should follow CDC guidelines on what types of face coverings are available and should be utilized. Reasonable. In February of 2022, the new Florida Surgeon General, Dr. Joseph Ladapo, released a directive that read, quote, "Despite a lack of evidence that masks, and particularly cloth face masks, prevent transmission of COVID-19, many corporations have continued to require their employees to wear masks. Unlike CDC guidance, Florida's new masking guidance advises against wearing facial coverings. There is not strong evidence that masks reduce the transmission of respiratory illness." That's the Surgeon General. This directive did not include data on which the decision was based. Thus, it was not possible for third-party independent scientists to evaluate the nature, type, or quality of the evidence used for this decision-making. In October 2022, Dr. Joseph Ladapo released a statement that was based on evidence created by unknown persons, but promoted by the state of Florida, that warned young adult men to stop taking coronavirus vaccines by Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech, citing an abnormally high risk of heart-related deaths. This release allowed third-party independent scientists to comment on the relationship between the quality of the data used and the policy directive that it was purported to support. The Washington Post noted, and I quote, "Ladapo's recommendation, extrapolated from a short state analysis that has not been peer-reviewed, carries no authors, and warns that its findings are preliminary and should be interpreted with caution, was swiftly condemned by medical and public health leaders, who said that the Florida Surgeon General's announcement was politics masquerading as science and could lead Americans to forego life-saving interventions." Well, there we have it. Here we have some really interesting juxtapositions of evidence used to inform policymaking. The story further noted, quote, "If you submitted the report to a peer-reviewed journal, unless you were paying them to publish it, it would get rejected. Putting out half-baked reports from a Department of Health is a dangerous thing to do." The story then continues. As Surgeon General, Ladapo's efforts to discourage parents from getting their children vaccinated, to challenge mask mandates, and to oppose gender dysphoria treatments for children have been opposed by numerous medical associations. However, these stances have won accolades and helped the governor burnish his credentials, for as a populist conservative, he runs for re-election and positions himself for the 2024 GOP presidential contest. Well, this is a nice example of the use of evidence in policy decision-making. In the first case, the Surgeon General, who was relatively independent of Mr. Ron DeSantis, the powerful populist governor of Florida, who was dismissed for his opinion. And in the second case, a Harvard-trained physician who had earned a robust following amongst populists and who rose to prominence after writing a number of op-eds in the Wall Street Journal questioning coronavirus vaccinations, mask wearing, and other mandates. So, colleagues, herein lies the rub. In the absence of clearly defined and transparent information on the scientific basis of policy decision-making, it is very difficult, if not almost impossible, to provide independent, nonpartisan review of policy directions. And even then, if you could, political ideology and election-directed strategies can pervert rational and compassionate public health interventions. Currently, we are living through a period in our history where ideological divides are providing strong incentives to either discount solid scientific evidence or weaponize evidence, or both. The rise of toxic populism, also known by such terms as the new fascism or the new ordered populism, has created substantial challenges to public support for generally accepted scientific evidence. It has also created an alternative universe in which the usual cut and thrust that characterizes development of consensually agreed upon scientific knowledge has been interpreted as a sign that scientific evidence is of little or no value because it is not always completely certain on a topic and because it changes over time. What most of us here would consider to be the usual and necessary process of the generation of scientific knowledge that results in our understandings changing as new evidence comes in is seen as a sign of weakness. Those who are seeking absolute certainty to existential questions or consider evidence to only be acceptable when it is an affirmation of their beliefs do not accept the very foundation that the creation of scientific evidence is based on. This distrust in evidence that does not support predetermined beliefs has actually morphed into a direct attack on the usual vehicles by which scientific evidence is provided to policymakers and the public. Furthermore, the cherry picking of low quality information has been touted as being high quality scientific evidence and has been weaponized by well-funded, highly active, identity-based groups whose purpose is to obtain power and rewrite our social contract. To be blunt, we are living in a time when evidence has been weaponized to support movements that do not see the institutions that democratically driven societies have managed to have created to manage ourselves as valuable. Indeed, they see them as an impediment to the creation of what fundamentally is an autocratic-based endgame. Perhaps the starkest of these examples is the unwillingness of a very large percentage of Americans to accept the process that most identifies the unique feature of democratic society. That is, the peaceful transition of political power following a free and ordered electoral process. The attack is not only against individuals, it is an attack on the institutions and the processes that define democratic government. While this fracturing is very evident in our neighbors to the south, it's also present here, and it's growing in strength. In our health and public health sphere, this manifests itself in the anti-vaccination movement, the anti-masking movement, the belief in conspiracy theories such as the Great Reset, the Deep State, the World Economic Forum is taking over the world, and many others that converge in a cauldron of chaos that does not accept any explanation except that which confirms belief. And any evidence contrary is seen as a justification of the validity of the belief. The movement has its own anointed leadership, its own high priests, its own scientific experts, creates its own evidence, and uses social media and non-traditional media as its information source. It denies value of evidence that does not support the belief system. One needs to look no further than the angry vitriol directed at Dr. Fauci to see how this process operates. Let me share with you some quotes from a number of emails that I received over the 2 days that I was preparing this talk. And I get about 10 to 20 of these daily. And during the convoy occupation, I had hundreds and hundreds of them daily, which was a delight. Just kidding. And these are our quotes. I'm writing to you because of our corrupted media, along with Health Canada's inability to look at these experimental therapeutic injections, that's vaccines, and openly discuss their findings by real experts. Why are there illegal and unconstitutional mandates? Someone needs a civics course. Forcing everyone to get these experimental injections when they are not working and are causing massive injuries and death. The sudden deaths occurring in thousands of individuals, the pandemic of instant death by heart failure, blood clots because of experimental injections. Please watch the evidence put forward by our doctors and our scientists. The information comes via Rumble, Canadian COVID Alliance, since our MSM is being highly monitored by forces. We are being lied to on a grand scale. Nearly 20 million lives are being lost. I'm a psychiatrist. This actually doesn't meet the criteria for delusion. Close. But I get so many of these. They're all variations on the theme. And when political leaders not only acquiesce, but promote such intensely felt disinformation, Houston, we have a problem. There are many ways to respond to this growing and now politicized infodemic, as WHO has called it. I'll use my remaining time to touch on only 3 that are pertinent to how we can use best available evidence to help inform policymaking in our parliamentary system. For each of these, I will touch on some ideas that the Academy could consider for possible implementation. These are transparency, providing best-in-class resources to support policy creation and data-driven decision-making. And understanding the direction I will take to address each of these areas is the realization that our governments are only as good with using best-in-class evidence for decision-making as we expect them to be. First, transparency. If we don't have transparency in what information our government uses to make decisions, we add fuel to the fire of those whose mistrust in our democratic institutions already burns. But perhaps more problematically, we raise doubt in those who support these institutions and for whom understanding what is being used to inform policy is an important part of supporting trust in these democratic institutions. I, as well as many others, are concerned that this transparency needs to be improved. In the recent correspondence between myself and Vanessa Sung, the interim executive director of Evidence for Democracy, she updated me on a study that her organization has just released. Although it focused on provincial government, its findings raise concern. They conclude, quote, "We found that provincial policies scored low on the transparency of evidence usage, meaning that it is difficult for the public to find the evidence being used to shape and justify policy." She goes on to note, quote, "The public must be given the opportunity to scrutinize the relationship between evidence and policy decisions that affect their daily lives. And transparency is the first step." I agree. So how can this be better realized in our Canadian federal parliamentary system? First and foremost is the vocalization of demand for transparency, and support for its importance. The Academy, as an institution, could collaborate with like-minded organizations to support and promote transparency in the type of evidence that governments are using to make key policy decisions. Similarly, every member of this Academy, as an individual, can also make this request. You are powerful both when you stay together, and you are powerful as a large group of individuals. Now, we're not naive enough to know that evidence is not the only factor that goes into policymaking. And we can appreciate that other factors may trump what evidence-based decision-making advises. But in the very least, we should be able to know what evidence was considered. If we know that, and experts can independently respond. And this dialectic between what was used and what could have been used may, over time, improve the quality and impact of the evidence used for policymaking. However, it is essential that this process of constructively critical analysis and response be structured independently of the adversarial system that defines our political reality. Second, providing independent, best-in-class resources to support policy creation. It is important to know what parliamentarians in our bicameral legislative system are routinely exposed to in terms of information and substantive evidence that they use for policy and legislative decision-making. It is also important to know what emphasis is put on evidence, what kind of evidence, and what quality of evidence is to be accepted. And this can be subjected to political goals, party ideology, and election-focused expediencies. That being said, it is, in my opinion, imperative that the quality and accessibility of evidence that is being used for policymaking be improved. I realize that my professional work as a researcher and clinician gives me a perspective on evidence that may not be similar to or even shared by some or many of my colleagues. I also realize that there are many factors that go into policy decision-making, of which robust scientific evidence is only one. So please keep these considerations in mind as you critically evaluate what I am going to say. First, let me draw attention to some key differences between the Senate and the House of Commons. Since 2015, senators are chosen through a vetted and independent committee process rather than a political party-affiliated process. And while the Prime Minister makes the final decision, the process allows for individuals who are not party faithful to be considered for selection. This is indeed a sea change in how appointments have traditionally been made. Furthermore, all senators appointed since 2015 are independent of party political caucuses. That means that while they can arrange themselves in groups internal to the Senate, they are not whipped and not told how to vote by any political party. And whipped in this context means told how to vote, just so it's clear. This is a revolutionary development, and one that creates a firewall between political party expediency and the need for sober second thought. This also suggests that actions directed towards improving the quality of evidence and the use of that evidence in policymaking be directed both to the House of Commons and to the Senate. Legislation is the ultimate expression of policymaking. If we use the percentage of government bills that are amended, and by that I mean improved, as a measure of independence, the current Senate is a very different kettle of fish than it was historically. For example, I sponsored a bill on environmental protection and management of toxic chemicals that had 30 amendments to it. That's a lot. So we receive our information from multiple sources, and we get pressure from social media and mainstream media. And in the House, political staffers create information for members of the House to use, and that comes through a political lens. Apart from one group in the Senate, that doesn't happen in the Senate. So there is an opportunity to be able to bring forward information that has not been pre-sifted to help with political decision-making, and that's important. Our Library of Parliament does a fantastic job to provide us information when we ask for it. But it may not have the necessary expertise in all areas. And if you don't ask for it, you don't get it, and people often don't read it. So one of the ideas for the Academy to think about is, can you act in a way that provides just-in-time information that is easy to understand, easy to digest? Infographics are good. And based on best available evidence. The United Kingdom has an interesting model called the Parliamentary Office for Science and Technology. The Academy has the expertise to have that kind of resource available. And finally, I'm going to spend the last time on committee hearings and witnesses in committees. And I know my time is running short, but this is so important. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on it. I cut back the whole middle part. Committee hearings are a key part of the complex process. And the committees, whether they study topics or legislation, they call witnesses to testify. And I know the Academy has made some attempts to provide independent witness lists for committees. And you need to keep doing that and keep doing that and keep doing that. Because those committees matter and those witnesses matter, but also you can provide briefs. So you're not a witness, but the brief is provided and we read the briefs, or at least I do. The problem is that the evidence that witnesses provide may not be what we in this room would consider to be scientifically valid. The challenge this kind of testimony has is that witnesses are free to make statements without cross-examination. So it's very different than in a court of law. And there is very little time or capacity to be able to fact check what a witness says against independent and possibly more objective and more scientifically sound databases. So thus, because the committees use the witness reports to help them make decisions, what the witness says is important, there is a huge possibility of substantive bias and even prejudged considerations. While efforts are made to provide balancing, often on party or ideological lines, of opposing opinions, that is so different than critically examining all opinions and using an independent standard to say, do they fit the data or not? That raises the challenge because the following statement captures it perfectly, and I quote, "Opinions are like belly buttons, everyone has one." And that's the anecdotal fallacy. So if committees use anecdotes only, we can't get to where we need to get. So we have to improve the quality of the witnesses and the briefs, and we need your help. Be we members of the House of Commons or members of the Senate, we need help from the Academy and from Canada's leading scientists and medical practitioners. I'm hopeful that one outcome of my intervention here today can lead to us continuing the journey that will enhance the use of best available evidence in parliamentary decision-making now and in the future. You have already made a difference. You are well-positioned to do more, and all Canadians will benefit when you do more. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Couture. And the call to action that you made at the end very much resonates with where we are as a board of the Academy and leads in extremely nicely to the next portion of our program. Because while being elected as a Fellow of the Academy is an honor, as I said before, it is also comes with a service responsibility. And I can say, under the guidance of our now past president, Siobhan Nelson, who is here, lovely to see you here again. Siobhan led us through a process of development of a strategic plan, which we finalized on August 31st, your last day in office, and presented it to the Academy through Zoom event. And that strategic plan will be sent out to all fellows, including the new ones, and is called Evidence to Impact, and really is very much aligned with your call to action at the end. One of the pieces that we've recently put in place in order to increase the awareness in the general community, and not just here in Ottawa, but across the country, about the work of the Academy, is that we created a new program called the CAHS President's Awards to recognize the outstanding contributions of individuals who are outside of the Academy, who've made exceptional contributions to the health sciences and the health of Canadians. Earlier today, you may have seen, if you looked at your email, and if you're a fellow of the Academy, you would have seen the announcement of the first batch of our CAHS President's Awardees, 5 exceptional individuals who fit the criteria of making exceptional contributions to the health sciences and the health of Canadians. And it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce you to our CEO of the Academy, Mr. Serge Bay, to tell us more about these awards and to introduce you to one of the inaugural awardees. Bienvenue, Serge.
Merci, Jay. I almost got Dr. Serge Buy. This would have been great for a guy who failed science in high school. I did political science after that. Thank you very much. My name is Serge Buy. I'm the CEO of the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences. Je suis le directeur général de l'Académie canadienne des sciences de la santé. It will be my distinct pleasure to introduce our guest, who will appear through a Zoom link in a couple of seconds. I do want to recognize someone that is in the room today as well, because we are having we had Dr. Kutcher, who spoke who comes from the Senate. We have our next guest. We have Minister Duclos as well, who will be speaking, but we also have Dr. Jane Philpott, former Minister of Health, was in attendance here, and thank you, Dr. Philpott, for being here. Much appreciated for your participation. One of our fellows. As Jay recognized, we have announced the recipients of the President's Awards. This was created last year, and the 3 presidents from the 2021 to 2022 term, Dr. Siobhan Nelson, who was the president then, the president-elect then, who is now the president, Dr. Jay Cross, and Dr. Chris Simpson, who was the past president, worked together to select the 5 recipients. And Dr. Simpson leading the committee, and the choices were made and announced, and one of them is with us today by Zoom. That's the Right Honorable former Prime Minister Paul Martin. That's someone who's been in politics. Right Honorable former Prime Minister Paul Martin. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce him today. He's made a fantastic contribution to the country and to health as well. Just quickly for his background, he was a member of Parliament from 1988 to 2008 for La Sarre-et-Mar in the Montreal region. In 1993, he became the finance minister and went on to serve as the longest serving finance minister in our country from 1993 to 2002. Came back in 2003 to become our prime minister, and one of the reasons we are honoring him today, and we gave him this award, is, amongst other things, the Kelowna agreement and the signing by all provinces of an agreement that was designed to provide funding to health care and health for 10 years. So fantastic achievement, along with many other achievements. Since leaving politics, he's founded the Martin Family Initiative, along with his family, which is meant to improve education, health, and overall well-being of Indigenous people in Canada. Again, it is my distinct pleasure to now put you through to Mr. Paul Martin. Monsieur Martin.
Merci beaucoup, M. Bois. J'ai eu un peu de difficulté à vous entendre. Je pense qu'on parlait ici, puis ils nous ont mis sur un autre son. But I do want to say, Mr. Boy, I really appreciate the invitation. I've got to also say to you before I begin my remarks that I think that you're giving me an opportunity to fill in some gaps in my early life. And in every family, sons do things which are not necessarily what the parents would want. Some of you will know that my father was a very long-term minister of health and welfare. And obviously he had his trouble getting money from the government and all of those kinds of things. And the story that I would tell you is that when I first went into cabinet, I went in as Minister of Finance, and which certainly caused an awful lot of raised eyebrows in my family. And I'll tell you the story. My father had passed away. My mother was very sick when I was named to the cabinet as Minister of Finance, and I went to see her at Hotel Dieu Hospital in our hometown of Windsor, Ontario. And as I walked into her room, there she was, and she was having a good day. And my mother, she looked at me and she said, "Paul, why?" And I said, "Mom, I'm here because you're not well." And she looked at me and she said, because the announcement had just been made with finance, she looked at me, she said, "That's not why." I said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, what is it, Mom?" And she said, "Paul, why finance?" And so I must say, I have lived through a good portion of my family where the fact that the son of the Minister of Health, who is obviously in major negotiations with the Minister of Finance throughout his career, his son became finance minister. And I'm here today to basically make amends to those of us who were looking in from heaven. Now, let me begin. I want to first of all thank Mr. Boyd for introducing me. I congratulate you, Dr. Cross, on your speech. And I just would say to you, good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. The first thing I want to do is to thank the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences, and to all of you participating in this event and its discussions. Permettez-moi aussi de remercier l'Académie canadienne des sciences de la santé pour l'honneur qu'on me fait de me décerner le prix des présidents. I'd like to also congratulate my fellow recipients for this award. And let me thank as well the members of the President's Awards Committee, Drs. Cross, Nelson, and Simpson. To receive this award is an honor, and it would be an honor under any circumstance. But coming as it does, following the pandemic, when the importance of science, research, and health is one of such clear consequence to everyone living everywhere, it makes it even more special. What we have lived through, I think that society in every country has learned an enormous amount. And I just hope that we have learned enough to deal with it properly. The situation in which we find ourselves is entirely due to those skills that the Academy of Sciences have put together. This is true for those of you who are witnessing this event. It is also true around the world. And I say this because the pandemic has taught us that our world is truly interdependent in ways we wish it wasn't, but it is. Disease waits at no border. It needs no passport. L'infection ne s'arrête à aucune frontière. As a result, ignoring dangerous illness anywhere in the world no longer makes sense. In fact, it never did. Those of us who visited Africa in recent years, at the time of the whole question of vaccines, understand very much what that meant. Fortunately for us, fortunately for what you talk about, science is universal, able to travel as far and as wide as any disease, able to help and to heal and to save lives. And that is why I believe the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences is so important. In 2004, the government's decision to focus on independent scientific advice led to the creation of the Academy, which was inspired by the need to find new ways to support health science. At that time, along with the provinces and territories, we reached historic commitments to healthcare funding. But we knew as well that more new money was necessary. We needed new approaches, new ideas, and new ways to facilitate those ideas. And that's why I say that the concept of the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences was motivated by the need to improve and enhance our understanding of health sciences, and healthcare, to support their study, and to place our trust in our experts, academics, researchers, and scientists. La création de l'Académie canadienne des sciences de la santé répond au besoin d'améliorer et approfondir notre compréhension des sciences de la santé, de comprendre leur importance, d'appuyer et soutenir leur recherche et de faire confiance à nos experts, nos universitaires, nos chercheurs et nos scientifiques. The Academy is not only a government's accomplishment. The Academy is a Canadian accomplishment, an ironclad belief in the power of science to unlock Canadian leadership and innovation, to help at home and to help around the world. L'Académie canadienne des sciences de la santé n'est pas seulement une réalisation gouvernementale, c'est une réalisation canadienne. Cela soutient une croyance inébranlable dans le pouvoir de la science pour promouvoir le leadership et l'innovation canadienne, pour l'aider non seulement chez nous, mais à travers le monde. We have always believed, and I know this is true of everybody in that room, everybody listening here, we have always believed that Canada could and should be a world leader in the sciences. And this goes way back to my father's time. It's an easy thing to say, but it is much harder to accomplish. And we learned early on that it means a lot more. It means investment in applied and basic research. It means committing to public sector R&D. It means incentivizing private sector R&D. It means creating networks and hubs that draw talent, dollars, know-how, and the pursuit of discovery. It means encouraging our academics and our researchers, supporting and mobilizing their talent. It means committing to our scientists, researchers, students, and the academies that support them. And it means bringing them together, creating the space for alliances and collaboration, the space for ingenuity to flourish. That was the motivation for enacting policies that led to the Canadian Academy of Health Science. And when I see what you have achieved nearly 20 years later, I am so struck by how far your work has surpassed our hopes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this incredible award. You honor me more than I deserve. And I'd like to close by stressing that the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences plays a crucial role as it provides independent assessments, reviews, and advice to policymakers. It is important that in a country like ours, the independence of the Academy and its work be supported by all of us from beginning to end. The Academy's work helps not only our capacity to produce outstanding science and science for our country's benefit, it does so for the benefit of everyone, for all of humankind. And I want to make one last point to go back to the debate that my father would have had between finance ministers and health ministers. About 2 or 3 years ago, but when the pandemic was still rampaging, I had a meeting. This is as a former finance minister, or former prime minister. I had a meeting with the group of 20, the finance ministers, of which I was founder and which I was once the head, the finance ministers G20. And what we were discussing was what healthcare meant to the economy. And there were most people who said, well, oh, the healthcare is an expenditure. So let me just say to everybody listening to this, healthcare may have one time been a government expenditure. But the one thing that we learned during the pandemic is that healthcare is the foundation for a strong economy. And that countries which cut short, which do not essentially put the necessary funding and support into healthcare, are economies that are not going to function. So what the Academy is really dealing with is certainly the healthcare that we all look to from government and from doctors and from the medical field. But what economists must look to is healthcare that gives us healthy populations. Because without a healthy population, you're not going to have a healthy economy. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Martin, on behalf of the room and the Zoom room that's out there, I want to thank you so much. Reiterate, you're a richly deserving recipient of the President's Awards, along with the other 4 awardees. It's a tremendous first class of people. The other thing I would say is, for those of us in the health research game or healthcare system, sometimes we have bad days and things get tough. And if we just played that Zoom recording, encouraging us, reminding us of that we're actually moving the needle. So thank you very much for those wonderful, wonderful comments. I'll just kick off with a few questions. We have about 10 minutes or so for questions. And so for those of you in the audience that have got questions, I'll give you some time to do that. We are living through a pandemic. I wouldn't say we've lived through it yet, Mr. Martin, but I know from your own personal history in talking with Serge that you yourself and your family, your parents, lived through a previous pandemic, specifically polio, and the value of vaccination in allowing the world, and certainly us in North America, to leave polio behind. And so I'm interested in your comments and your reflections on kind of how you would compare the polio pandemic and the role of vaccination with where we are today.
Well, I think what I would do is really go back to the context that I was talking to you about, is that we tend to divide things up. Health, this is healthcare, this is the economy. The fact is that there is no division. As I mentioned, you're not going to have a strong economy without strong healthcare. You're not going to have strong healthcare without a strong economy. What is so important is that we take the position, and that the academies take the position, that in fact what we're really doing is talking about common policy across the whole spectrum of things. But I also believe, and I made this reference, it is so important that Canada be prepared to take the lead. I mentioned to you the G20. If you take a look at the international discussions that take place, Canada's ability to lead is very strong because what we stand for and how we go about it. And I believe that we're going to have a huge role to play. And one of the examples I think that I would give to this, and this you talked about polio, is that what happened, you may remember that, and this was happened when my father was Minister of Health, that the Salk vaccine was discovered. And this was for the first time that factually human beings were able to match up against polio. But what happened was that the Salk vaccine was discovered by the brilliant American doctor. The Connaught Labs in Canada were able to provide, were the people who provide him with the medallion, that is to say the viruses that he could work on in order to develop the vaccine, and which no one else could provide him with. So Connaught played a very, very important role in this area. But then, as you know, when the Salk vaccine was discovered, they basically, we obviously gave the whole question to Connaught for Canada, but the Americans gave it to a multitude of labs in their country. And one of those labs ended up having a bad batch, and a young person died from taking what they had. And as a result of this immediately in the United States, they said, we've got to put the whole Salk vaccine on hold. And the same thing was said in Canada. My father was very upset with this because having had polio and his son, myself, having had polio, he knew that the number of people were going to suffer who, if they could not get at the vaccine. But the basic push from the United States was, we're going to cancel this for a long time to come. And there were those in Canada who said the same thing. So what my dad did is he took some of the really senior medical people from health and welfare. They went down to the Connaught Labs and they demonstrated clearly that the vaccine worked. And as a result of that, as the Americans started to do the same thing, they took it on. They basically agreed. The Salk vaccine passed. But one of the things that we learned afterwards is that the Americans said, if Canada stays rigid and not accepting the vaccine, it's going to be impossible for us to convince people that they've got to do it. And it was when Canada said, well, we're going with the vaccine, we've talked to Connaught, we believe in it, and we're going to support it, that the Americans really then came on side and took the whole thing over. And then the rest is history. What I'm saying, all I'm really saying in that story is I think this shows that what the academies can do. I really believe that the academy is going to have a huge influence on the future of the world, because what it's going to do is be the body that will lead the world to work together on something that should not be divided, and that's the health of humanity. And I feel very good about this, and I feel very good about the academies in Canada. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Just to pick up on that, obviously pandemics are a global phenomenon. One of the things that you said that I wrote down is that science is universal, which it clearly does. It doesn't respect boundaries, it doesn't respect scientific journals, etc. And so I'm interested in your thoughts, because you've not only contributed enormously to health sciences here in Canada, but also been very thoughtful about your work internationally. What does global cooperation look like? And is there, in your vision, an opportunity for the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences to be working with like academies in other countries to help governments that are cooperating at that level of government decision-making, but to support the evidence-based science decision-making? So I'm interested in your thoughts on cooperation.
Well, first of all, yes, I think that there's an enormous opportunity for the academies. first thing, the first example is the economies are themselves are working together, people working together. And in a world in which people not just don't necessarily work well together. And so when we demonstrate that the economies in our country are working together on these health issues, and not just health issues, but working together with health issues as they marry with the wide rest of other issues that have got to be done, it gives us a huge leadership position. And over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, you are going to see an enormous amount of this. The Minister of Health, as I understand it, is going to be speaking today or at some point. What's really happening within the G20 is that there is a recognition that while the G7, the G8, and all of these organizations were put together to bridge the gaps between countries. But as we look at what the pandemic did, as we look at climate change, we recognize that there is something greater than the rivalries between countries. Those are the powers that are out there that are taking on the strongest countries in the world beyond the powers that any country can have. That's certainly what health does, and that's certainly what climate change does. And so what you're going to start to see is more and more organizations such as the G20 essentially bringing countries together. And I know that as you look at what's going on in the Ukraine, that people are going to say, well, my God, why isn't it happening there? And it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be mistakes. Doesn't mean that there aren't going to be the people who are going to go off on their own. But I can tell you there is overwhelmingly an understanding on behalf of humanity that we are dealing with forces which are far greater than we can afford to let work out there by countries ignoring each other. And so I think that what we piloted here in Canada with the academies is something that other people are looking to. And I've had questions on it. And I really do believe that one of the things that the health academies ought to do is to spend some time telling the rest of the world what they've done.
Thank you so much for that. Are there any questions from the audience? We have a few minutes remaining. So if there aren't any questions, maybe I'll just ask the last one. And just to pick up on what you said, you've said so many optimistic things about us, and you talked about Canada leading in health sciences, which I think the audience is excited about. What would you say are Canada's secret strengths that the world doesn't know about or doesn't recognize us, and that we should be sticking our chests out and being more proud of and taking that leadership role? Sometimes we're too humble in this country. So what would you say are the one or two things that we should be more proud of and just go out and lead with?
I think our greatest strength is that we have always understood that there is no such thing as an answer that satisfies one or two powerful countries and ignores the rest. And I think that we have always understood that multilateralism really means that we have to sit down and work things out. That we also understand that it's not easy, that there are going to be huge differences. Certainly Ukraine is one of those where it's not going to be possible to resolve them, but that eventually it will be done. So when you say what is our advantage, I really think it's our experience. I think that we've had the ability to pass that experience on through governments in our own country, and that essentially when you talk to the world, that's what the world is looking for. The world is looking for essentially the major industrial countries to understand that everybody's got to be part, not just of the decision making, but it's got to be part of the implementation. And I think that we can play. I think if we play that role right, we will have a huge influence. And if we don't play it right, then we're not going to solve those problems.
Well, Mr. Martin, thank you so much for your comments. Congratulations on being inaugural recipient of the CAHS President's Award. Merci beaucoup. Now on to the rest of the program, basically on time. It is now my privilege to host the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences Fellow Induction Ceremony. As I said before, induction into the Academy as a fellow is the highest honor I think we have in Canada for recognition of leaders in the health sciences. You are elected by your peers, recognized for the incredible work that you do, your recognition internationally, not just within your own home province, for your scientific creativity and for making a difference in the health sciences, whether that's as a basic scientist, a surgeon, a nephrologist, or a public health official. So as new fellows, you have much to be proud of. For those friends and families you're here, you should be really proud of your loved ones that are receiving this honor today. So congratulations to all of you. And so the process of electing fellows is a bit of an arduous process, requires detailed nominations, and there's a committee that does things beautifully behind the scenes. And I want to acknowledge the incredible work of the co-chairs for the last couple of years, Dr. Proton Raman and Zubin Austin, for their hard work in assessing the fellowship nominations. Proton has stepped away and Zubin holds the reins for the next few years. And now I want to invite Serge back to the stage. Mr. Serge, please come back to the stage, who will be the maître de cérémonie for our induction ceremony. And I would also welcome the president-elect of the Academy, Marie-France Reynaud, to please come to the stage.
Thank you very much for this, Jay. We are going to proceed with the induction, and I will serve as the master of ceremony. I'm going to ask for a process and ease of process for all the 2022 inductees to be on this side of the room. And when you hear your name, please proceed to the desk. So all the 2022 inductees, if you can be to this side of the room if possible. Great. We're going to give you a couple of minutes to get there. You can shake hands. Great. So I'm going to start calling names. There's quite a lineup, and if you please can make your way to the room. I'm going to start by Dr. Gordon Asmundson, Professor of Psychology, University of Regina. Dr. Gordon Asmundson, Professeur de Psychologie à l'Université de Regina. Docteur. Thank you very much, Doctor. Dr. Isabelle Aubert, Senior Scientist, Sunnybrook Research Institute, Professor, Canada Research Chair in Brain Repair and Regeneration, University of Toronto. Dr. Isabelle Aubert, Scientifique chevronnée, Sunnybrook Research Institute, Professeur titulaire de la chaire de recherche du Canada en réparation et régénération du cerveau de l'Université de Toronto. Dr. Aubert. And just for ease of purpose, our photograph is here. So when we take the pictures, if you can take a look over there. So Jay doesn't have to repeat it for about 62 times. Dr. John Bell, Senior Scientist, the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, Professeur of Medicine, University of Ottawa. Dr. John Bell, Scientifique chevronné, Institut de recherche de l'Hôpital d'Ottawa, Professeur de Médecine à l'Université d'Ottawa. Dr. Bell. Dr Annick Bérard, professeur à l'Université de Montréal. Dr Annick Bérard, professor at Université de Montréal. Dr Bérard. Dr. Christopher Booth, Professor of Oncology, Queen's University, Kingston Health Sciences Research Center. Professeur d'oncologie, Université Queen's, Centre des sciences de la santé de Kingston. Dr. Booth. Dr. Anthony Chan, Professor of Pediatrics, McMaster University, Hamilton Health Sciences, McMaster Children's Hospital, Professeur de Pédiatrie, Université McMaster, Association des sciences de la santé de Hamilton, Hôpital McMaster pour enfants. Dr. Chan. Dr. Francesca Cicchetti, Professor of Faculty of Medicine, Université Laval. Dr. Francesca Cicchetti, Professeur, Faculté de Médecine, Université Laval. Dr. Cicchetti. Dr. David Edwards, Professor, School of Pharmacy, University of Waterloo. Dr. David Edwards, Professeur, École de Pharmacie, Université de Waterloo. Dr. Edwards. Dr. Josephine Etowa, Professor and OHTN Chair in Black Women's HIV Prevention and Care, School of Nursing, University of Ottawa. Professeur et récipiendaire d'une chaire du réseau ontarien de traitement du VIH sur la prévention et la prise en charge du VIH chez les femmes noires, École des sciences infirmières, Université d'Ottawa. Dr. Etowa. Dr. Stephen Friedman, Professor of Pediatrics and Emergency Medicine, Alberta Children's Hospital Foundation, Professor of Child Health and Wellness, Cummings School of Medicine, University of Calgary. Dr. Stephen Friedman, Professeur de Pédiatrie et de Médecine d'urgence, Professeur de Santé et de Bien-être de l'enfant pour l'Alberta Children's Hospital Foundation, Cummings School of Medicine, Université de Calgary. Dr. Friedman. Dr. Sipali Guruje, Professor, Toronto Metropolitan University, Professeur, Université métropolitaine de Toronto. Dr. Guruje. Dr. Meredith Irwin, Chief of Pediatrics, Hospital of Sick Children, Chair, Department of Pediatrics, University of Toronto. Dr. Irwin, Chef de Pédiatrie, Hospital for Sick Children, Directrice du département de pédiatrie de l'Université de Toronto. Dr. Irwin. Dr. Satyabrata Kar, Professor, University of Alberta. Dr. Satyabrata Kar, Professor, Université de l'Alberta. Dr. Kar. Dr. Karim Khan, Professor and Scientific Director at the University of British Columbia, Canadian Institute of Health Research. Dr. Karim Khan, Professeur et Directeur scientifique, Université de la Colombie-Britannique, Institut de recherche en santé du Canada. Dr. Khan. Dr. Feifei Liu, Radiation Oncologist, Princess Margaret Cancer Center, University Health Network, Professor and Chair, University of Toronto, Department of Radiation Oncology. Radio-oncologue, Princess Margaret Cancer Center, Réseau universitaire de santé, professeur et titulaire d'une chaire, Université de Toronto, département de radio-oncologie. Dr. Liu. Dr. James McKillop, professor, McMaster University, St. Joseph's Healthcare, Hamilton, professeur, Université McMaster, Centre de santé, soins de santé, Saint-Joseph, Hamilton. Merci, Dr. McKillop. Dr. Paramaswaran Nair, Frederick E. Earthgrave, Teva Innovation Chair and Professor of Medicine, McMaster University. Dr. Parameswaran Nair, titulaire de la recherche, Frederick E. Earthgrave, Teva Innovation, et professeur de médecine, Université de McMaster. Dr. Nair. Dr. Nicholas Ogden, Director, Public Health Risk Sciences Division, National Microbiology Laboratory Branch, Public Health Agency of Canada. Dr. Ogden, Directeur, Division des sciences de risque pour la santé publique, Laboratoire national de microbiologie, Agence de la santé publique du Canada. Dr. Ogden. Dr. Kathleen Pichura Fuller, Professor Emerita, University of Toronto, Professeur émérite, Université de Toronto. You can go here if you want. You can go either way. We do not discriminate, left, right. Dr. Lisa Robinson, this is going to take me a little bit longer to read. Dr. Lisa Robinson, Vice Dean, Strategy and Operation and Professor, Department of Pediatrics and Institute of Medical Sciences, Temerty Faculty of Medicine, University of Toronto, Staff Physician, Division of Nephrology, the Hospital for Sick Children, Senior Scientist, Program in Cell Biology, the Hospital for Sick Children Research Institute. Vice-doyen Stratégie et Opération, Professeur, Département de Pédiatrie et Institute of Medical Science, Faculté de Médecine Temerty, Université de Toronto, médecin, membre du personnel, service de néphrologie, the Hospital for Sick Children, scientifique principal, programme de biologie cellulaire, the Hospital for Sick Children Research Institute. Dr. Robinson. Dr. Mark Roger, Chair, Department of Medicine, McGill University and Physician-in-Chief, McGill University Health Center. Dr. Mark Roger, Président, Département de Médecine, Université McGill, médecin-chef, Centre universitaire de santé McGill. Dr. Roger. Dr. Danica Stanimirovic, directrice, Recherche et Développement, Conseil national de recherche du Canada. Director, Research and Development, National Research Council of Canada. Dr. Stanimirovic. Dr. David Striner, Emeritus Professor, McMaster University, St. Joseph's Healthcare. Dr. David Striner, Professeur émérite, Université McMaster, Centre de soins de santé, Saint-Joseph. Dr. Bernard Thébault, Senior Scientist, Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, neonatologist, Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, full Professor of Pediatrics, University of Ottawa. Dr. Thébault, scientifique principal, Institut de recherche de l'hôpital d'Ottawa, néonatologiste, centre hospitalier pour enfants de l'Est de l'Ontario, professeur titulaire de pédiatrie, Université d'Ottawa. Dr. Thébault. Dr. Cécile Tremblay, Medical Microbiologist and Infectious Diseases Specialist, Centre hospitalier de l'Université de Montréal, Full Professor, Université de Montréal. Dr. Tremblay, médecin, microbiologiste et infectiologue, Centre hospitalier de l'Université de Montréal, professeur titulaire, Université de Montréal. Dr. Tremblay. Merci, docteur. Dr. Valerie Wallace, co-director, Donald K. Johnson Eye Institute, Campbell Research Institute, University Health Network. Co-directrice, Donald K. Johnson Eye Institute, Institut de recherche Campbell, University Health Network. Merci, Dr. Wiles. Dr. C. Nadine Wathan, Professor and Canada Research Chair, Arthur Labatt Family School of Nursing, Western University. Dr. Wathan, professeur titulaire d'une chaire de recherche du Canada, Arthur Labatt Family School of Nursing, Université Western. Dr. George Zanel, Professor, Medical Microbiology and Infectious Diseases, University of Manitoba. Dr. George Zanel, Professeur, Microbiologie médicale et maladies infectieuses, Université du Manitoba. Dr. Zanel. I believe we have recognized all the 22 fellows. We're going to go to the 2021 fellows. And while all the 2021 fellows, if you can move to the side here, please, that would be greatly appreciated. Well, I apologize for any potential mispronunciation. If I mispronounce your name, you're welcome to hit me over the head at one point. There's enough doctors to help after that in the room. We're going to start Dr. Malik Batal, Professor and Canada Research Chair in Nutrition and Health Inequalities, Université de Montréal. Dr. Malik Batal, professeur et titulaire de la chaire de recherche du Canada en inégalité, en nutrition et en santé, Université de Montréal. Dr. Batal. Merci, docteur. Dr. Rina Bendayan, Professeur Leslie Dan, Faculty of Pharmacy, University of Toronto, professeur à la faculté de pharmacie Leslie Dan, Université de Toronto. Dr. Adalstein Brown, Professor and Dean, Dalla Lana School of Public Health, University of Toronto. Dr. Adalstein Brown, Professeur et doyen de l'École de santé publique Dalla Lana, Université de Toronto. I believe Dr. Brown is not with us today. So we'll move to Dr. Christine Chambers, Professor, Dalhousie University. Professeur, Université Dalhousie. Dr. Chambers. Dr. Stephen Ferguson, Professor and Canada Research Chair, University of Ottawa. Dr. Stephen Ferguson, Professeur et titulaire de chaire de recherche du Canada, Université d'Ottawa. Dr. Ferguson. I recognize the next name for being on my programs committee and for his multiple tweets. Dr. David Fissman, Professor, University of Toronto, Professeur, Université de Toronto. Dr. Fissman. And thank you, Dr. Fissman, for being involved in the work of the Academy, like all the others in there. And Dr. Stephen Hoffman, Professor, York University and Vice President at the Public Health Agency of Canada. Dr. Stephen Hoffman, Professeur, Université York et Vice-Président, Agence de la Santé publique du Canada. As we talked about having more impact within government circles, Dr. Hoffman directly decided to join the agency and become a vice president. Thank you, Doctor. Dr. David Kelton, Professor of Epidemiology, University of Guelph. Dr. David Kelton, Professeur d'Épidémiologie, Université de Guelph. Dr. John Musedere, Professor, Queen's University. Dr. John Musedere, Professor, University Queen's. Dr. Jim Petrick, Professor, University of Guelph. Dr. Jim Petrick, Professeur, Université de Guelph. Dr. Petrick is not there, so we will move to Dr. Jane Philpott, Dean, Faculty of Health Sciences, Queen's University. Dr. Jane Philpott, doyenne, Faculté des Sciences de la Santé, Université Queen's. And while the bio doesn't say on the screen, former Minister of Health, ancienne ministre de la Santé. Merci, docteur. Dr. Rebecca Pillai-Riddell, Professor and York Research Chair in Pain and Mental Health, York University. Dr. Rebecca Pillai-Riddell, professeure et titulaire de la chaire de recherche de York sur la douleur et les problèmes de santé mentale, Université York. Dr. Rémi Rabassa-Lauré, Professor of Medicine and Nutrition, Université de Montréal, Institut de recherche clinique de Montréal. Dr. Rémi Rabassa-Lauré, professeur de médecine et de nutrition, Université de Montréal, Institut de recherche clinique de Montréal. Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Fred Sad, Professor and Chief of Urology and Director of GU Oncology, Centre hospitalier de l'Université de Montréal. Dr. Fred Sad, professeur et chef du service d'urologie et directeur du service d'oncologie génie urinaire en Centre hospitalier de l'Université de Montréal. Merci, Dr. Sad. Dr. Walter Sequeira, Dean and Professor, College of Dentistry, University of Saskatchewan. Dr. Walter Sequeira, professeur et doyen, Faculté de médecine dentaire, Université de la Saskatchewan. Merci, Dr. Sequeira. Dr. Susan Toff, Professor, Pediatrics, Cummings School of Medicine, University of Calgary. Dr. Susan Toff, Professeur de Pédiatrie, Cummings School of Medicine, Université de Calgary. You just saw the Calgary connection. Thank you, Doctor. I think we've got all the fellows for 2021, if I'm not mistaken. I'm now going to ask for the fellows for 2020 to go and join the wall there, please. Okay. We're going to start. Dr. Anne-Marie Adams, Professor, McGill University. Dr. Anne-Marie Adams, Professeur, Université McGill. Dr. Chantal Dumoulin, Professeur, School of Rehabilitation, Université de Montréal. Dr. Chantal Dumoulin, Professeur, École de Réadaptation, Université de Montréal. Dr. Dumoulin. Dr. Alison Eddy, Professor Emerita, Department of Pediatrics, University of British Columbia. Dr. Alison Eddy, Professeur Émérite, Département de Pédiatrie, Université de la Colombie-Britannique. Dr. Eddy, thank you. Dr. Jaspinder Kamal, Assistant Deputy Minister, Defense Research and Development Canada, Department of National Defense. Dr. Jaspinder Kamal, sous-ministre adjoint, Recherche et Développement pour la Défense Canada, Ministère de la Défense nationale. Dr. Kamal, I do not see you here. So we are going to move. He is also a claim to fame, the former Chief Veterinary Officer at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Dr. Marlis Koshinsky, Professor of Physiology and Pharmacology, Western University. Dr. Marlis Koshinsky, Professeur de Physiologie et de Pharmacologie, Université Western, and member of our Governance Committee. Dr. Koshinsky, thank you very much. I am trying to recognize some of the fellows that are also involved in committees within CAHS and do work within already the Academy, and I certainly recommend and encourage all of you to volunteer for various activities at the Academy. A lot of you are doing it already. I recognize Dr. Avi Bojo, who is the co-chair for our Health Human Resources Assessment right now. Dr. Jeffrey Mogill, EP Taylor Professor of Pain Studies, McGill University. Dr. Jeffrey Mogill, professeur titulaire de la recherche EP sur les études sur la douleur, Université McGill. Merci, Dr. Mogill. Dr. Colin Norris, Professor, Scientific Director, Cardiovascular Health and Stroke Strategic Clinical Network, Faculty of Nursing, University of Alberta. Dr. Colin Norris, Professeur, Directeur Scientifique, Cardiovascular Health and Stroke Strategic Clinical Network, Faculté des Sciences Infirmières, Université d'Alberta. Dr. Norris must have missed the flight. So we'll move to Dr. Vardit Ravitsky, Full Professor, Department of Social and Preventative Medicine, Université de Montréal. Dr. Vardit Ravitsky, professeur titulaire, département de médecine sociale et préventive, Université de Montréal. Dr. Ravitsky. Merci, Dr. Ravitsky. Dr. Ravi Ratnakaran, clinician scientist, Mount Sinai Hospital Leadership, Sinai Center for Diabetes. Clinicien, chercheur, hôpital Mount Sinai Leadership, Sinai Center for Diabetes. Dr. Ratnakaran. Dr. Brent Schachter, Professor Emeritus, Department of Internal Medicine, University of Manitoba. Dr. Brent Schachter, Professeur Émérite, Département de Médecine Interne, Université du Manitoba, who also merits an award for having stood on the wall, by the wall since the 2022 Fellows. Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Janet Smiley, Professor, Dalalana School of Public Health, University of Toronto, and Director, Well Living House and Staff Physician, Unity HealthNet Health Toronto. Professeur, École de Santé Publique Dalalana, Université de Toronto, Directrice, Well Living House et médecin, membre du personnel Unity Health Toronto. Dr. Smiley, thank you. Thank you very much. And our final recipient for this evening, Dr. Barbara van der Heijden, Professor, Senior Scientist, and Corinne Boyer, Chair of Ovarian Cancer Research, University of Ottawa and Ottawa Hospital. Dr. Barbara van der Heijden, Professeur scientifique principal et chaire de recherche Corinne Boyer sur le cancer de l'ovaire, Université d'Ottawa et l'Hôpital d'Ottawa. Dr. van der Heijden, merci. This concludes the part of the induction ceremony. We're going to take a couple of minute break while we reset this to set it up for the dialogue format. And you're welcome to use the washroom for a couple of minutes, but do not take too long because we should be back here in about 5 to 10 minutes at the max. So we've got a 5-10 minute break. Merci. Excuse me.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to take your seats.
Si vous pouvez prendre vos fauteuils, Jay.
All right, so please take your seats. Just one announcement before I introduce the next segment of the program is that following the next segment, the dialogue with the Minister of Health, we invite all of the newly inducted fellows and their nominators to gather outside of the room for a group photo. And hopefully the minister can stay around, so group photo with the minister. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce the President-elect of the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences, Marie-France Renaud, as well as the past President, Siobhan Nelson, to please come to the stage, and they will introduce the next segment. So welcome.
Alors, bonjour à tous et bienvenue à cette session. On m'a demandé de présenter quelqu'un qui n'a pas besoin d'être présenté et de simplement mentionner qu'il était le ministre de la Santé. Je veux quand même ajouter que non seulement il est ministre de la Santé, mais c'est un scientifique de haut niveau dans les sciences économiques. Et ça lui permet là, de voir les deux côtés, de créer les évidences et ensuite d'avoir à vivre avec la création en question. Alors, welcome to the Honorable Jean-Yves Duclos, Minister of Health. Jean.
Merci beaucoup. On ne m'a pas demandé de présenter Marie-France, mais je vais le faire quand même en vous disant que Marie-France est une grande amie. Je ne dirais pas une vieille amie parce qu'elle est encore toute jeune. Et moi, jeune dans ma tête, certainement. Mais on se connaît depuis un bon bout de temps. Et je peux dire qu'on a la chance d'avoir quelqu'un comme Marie-France qui accepte d'être présidente de cette grande académie. Et Siobhan, congratulations on having steered this wonderful academy for some time already. Est-ce que M. Martin est dans la salle? Paul Martin?
Online.
OK.
Oui.
Bon, M. Martin, évidemment, on pense beaucoup à vous si vous m'écoutez. On a eu la chance de se rencontrer à quelques reprises dans le passé et recevoir le prix des présidents, c'est un immense honneur, mais c'est un honneur qui est partagé, je pense, parce que grâce à vous, mais pas juste à vous, et à toute l'équipe, et ça fait depuis de nombreuses années, l'Académie a pu jouer un rôle très important pour faire le lien entre la science et les gens. So it's all about linking science, scientists, and people. And I think the Academy is a wonderful example of how that can be done with the highest scientific standards, but the strictest emphasis on what people expect of science and scientists.
Good.
Well, we'll begin the proceedings with some questions that we have to start our dialogue. COVID has reminded Canadians of the importance of a strong health system. Could you share with us what some of the lessons government has learned over the course of the pandemic?
Well, that's a great question. In fact, I'll point to what I just said earlier. I think COVID-19 showed us the power and indeed the necessity of science and scientists. I believe that Canadians and other humans now have, despite all the trouble and the violence that COVID-19 inflicted on people's lives, I think people now have an even greater appreciation for the role of knowledge, researchers and scientists. This is humbling, given that however important science and scientists have been during COVID-19, there is a lot more work to do. The reason I'm slightly late, and that's not an excuse, it's just the reason that I was at a cabinet committee meeting. I can't reveal to you, obviously, the content of that meeting. I can just say that during that meeting, we spoke about the increasing connection between the natural environment, the health of that natural environment, the health of people, and the health of our society. And although I am a social scientist, I'll never be a member or fellow of this academy. I know and feel and appreciate the connection, as Marie-France made earlier, the connection between all of these important aspects of our individual and social life. So I think it's the biggest lesson, how important science and scientists are, but how important communications are, and how critical that is in a world in which there is increasing, unfortunately, disinformation, increasing distrust, not only in governments, but in scientists themselves. That's troubling because most of the progress we've made as humankind has been led by science and scientists and researchers, experts, doctors, including social scientists to some extent. That's a source of progress. But unfortunately, there is now in our world, including in Canada, a strong trend towards ignoring and in many cases distorting the value and the contribution of scientists. So that's the darker side of the answer, but the brighter side is all of the capital, the social capital, the recognition capital that has been built by scientists over COVID-19.
Okay.
Les membres de l'Académie se demandent, étant donné qu'on a eu des leçons de la dernière pandémie, comment on se prépare pour la prochaine, parce qu'il y aura une prochaine, et probablement de notre vivant, malheureusement. Alors, comment le gouvernement canadien envisage ça? Qu'est-ce qu'il fait comme travaux?
Comme Marie-France le sait très bien, en raison de son expertise et sa contribution remarquable au cours des derniers mois, particulièrement au Québec, il y aura d'autres pandémies. Elles vont être de plus en plus fréquentes, de plus en plus inquiétantes. La pandémie de la COVID-19 n'est pas terminée non plus. L'OMS nous le rappelait il y a quelques jours à peine. Ce que l'on sait, d'après à l'Assemblée générale de l'OMS, on entendait qu'il n'y a jamais eu dans l'histoire de l'humanité autant d'urgences de santé publique. Et c'est très récent, l'Ebola, le choléra, les nouvelles souches de la variole simienne, la COVID-19 qui n'arrête pas de muter 5 fois plus rapidement que la COVID-19, que les autres virus respiratoires comme la grippe. Tout ça, c'est explicable évidemment par l'incidence de l'activité humaine sur l'environnement naturel, les voyages plus fréquents, la proximité des animaux avec l'être humain, mais aussi la migration des animaux dans des environnements où on ne les a jamais retrouvés, les contacts entre les milieux naturels qui n'ont jamais été observés dans le passé. Alors tout ça, c'est très inquiétant. Évidemment, entre nous, on peut gérer cette anxiété en investissant davantage dans la science et la recherche, mais pour l'être humain moyen, pour le Canadien moyen, c'est une grande source d'inquiétude pour le futur. Donc, c'est ce que je dirais, c'est qu'il faut continuer d'investir dans les données, dans les connaissances. En le faisant ensemble, on y va plus vite et mieux. L'union fait la force. L'union scientifique, l'union des chercheurs, évidemment, on le sait comme chercheurs, c'est ça qui fait notre force collective. On travaille avec d'autres chercheurs, d'autres données, d'autres techniques, d'autres méthodologies auxquelles on a accès en étant présent dans l'environnement mondial de la recherche. Mais c'est vrai aussi au point de vue social et sanitaire, la raison pour laquelle on a pu, au Canada en particulier, agir si rapidement pour protéger les gens du virus, les protéger d'un point de vue économique, social et santé, c'est parce que les gouvernements ont travaillé entre eux. Le gouvernement canadien a fait sa part, les gouvernements des provinces et des territoires aussi. Si on avait agi de manière indépendante et non coordonnée, les résultats auraient été beaucoup plus graves en matière de mortalité, en matière d'hospitalisation, d'incidence de la COVID longue. Les travailleurs de la santé seraient encore plus épuisés. Donc, l'union fait la force, on l'a vu durant la COVID-19, et c'est ça, je pense, qu'il faut faire pour se préparer pour les futures pandémies, parce qu'il y en aura. Comme je disais, là, c'est le constat des chercheurs et des experts partout sur la planète.
You talked a bit earlier about misinformation, disinformation being something of a feature of what we learned from over the past few years. But one of the other things that we've learned or had exposed over the past few years is the enormous inequities that there are within our society and the differential impact of the pandemic on different sectors of society. What does the government intend to put in place to address these issues that have become so clearly exposed as a result of the pandemic?
Two things. First, two things. One quickly, and then the other point a bit longer. The first point points again to Marie-France. In my earlier life, but prior to 2015, both Marie-France and I sat on a consultative committee on how to reduce poverty in Quebec. But thanks to Marie-France and many others, and our economists also acknowledge that, because we were also mindful of this. Now, inequalities and determinants of poverty matter very much. You might want to redistribute taxes or benefits and have a progressive tax system. That's all right, that's all fine. But when you do that, you intervene after the economic outcomes have been generated by the underlying socioeconomic and sociodemographic and environmental determinants of income and labor inequality. So it's better to act in a preventive fashion when you look at poverty and inequality than a curative fashion. The same thing for health. The socio-economic determinants of health are fundamental. Approximately, according to experts again, approximately 80% of the health outcomes are due to things that have nothing to do with the quality of healthcare. Healthcare is different. I happen to be the Minister of Health, not the Minister of Healthcare. And that's great, because apparently 80% of the health outcomes, including 80% of the economic outcomes, which are determinants of the health outcomes, are determined by the family in which you happen to be born, where you go to school, the quality of the air that you breathe, your genetic determinants, the healthy food you eat, the healthy living you live, who you spend your time with, the quality of your interpersonal relationships. So that's all driven by things that have nothing to do with healthcare, nothing to do with the tax and benefit redistribution system. So that's where we want to invest our substantial resources. And in connection to this, therefore, is the importance of public health. The Public Health Agency in Canada now is a stronger agency than it used to be prior to COVID-19. It was strong, but it's now stronger, and it will need to be stronger, because public health includes individual health, but it goes beyond individual health. It recognizes that many of these determinants of individual health are driven by the public environment, including the natural environment in which we live. And that includes, by the way, the confidence that people have in society. So the confidence that people have in others and in institutions, that also drives mental health and physical health and overall well-being.
So in terms of specificities around what the government is planning to do, you're talking about a broad program of interventions. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, exactly that. So the health portfolio has it's 4 Ps. It's the P for prevention. So it's all about preventing diseases from occurring, including infectious diseases. The second P is protecting. So protecting the health of people against chemicals and dangerous products and dangerous environments in which people may be living if the regulations and other tools that the government can use are not sufficiently supportive of the protection of people's health. Then you've got the promotion. Promotion is about healthy living, healthy eating, making again, there's a social environment of people conducive to better physical and mental health. And the 4th P is partnership, because we need to be partners of the provinces and territories, which obviously have a very big role in reducing inequalities and protecting, promoting, and preventing diseases, but also have to deal with what we do when people get sick. So healthcare, including mental health care, impose a heavy burden on provinces and territories. So the federal government needs to be a partner, financially so, but more than financially. There are ways in which the federal government can provide support to the very difficult healthcare agenda that provinces and territories need to support. So in practice, how it's done, I could go on and speak to the many different programs that PHAC in particular implement around prevention, promotion, and protection. But I'm sure you might want.
Thank you.
Might not want to hear all of that.
Vous avez mentionné tout à l'heure que vous sortiez d'une discussion avec vos collègues pour décider de nouvelles politiques publiques. De l'intérieur, comment s'est reçue la science pour informer les politiques? Est-ce qu'il y a des moyens de la rendre plus séduisante pour les politiques?
Ben, moi, certainement, j'ai un gros problème, c'est que j'aime les détails. Puis comme chercheur, on a besoin de s'intéresser aux détails. Alors, mon problème, c'est souvent comment je communique clairement des choses compliquées. Et c'est le défi de beaucoup d'entre vous, y compris, évidemment, toi, Marie-France, dans tes fonctions. Donc, il faut communiquer clairement, mais il faut aussi être fidèle et honnête dans ce qu'on dit. Donc, des fois, quand on est trop simple, on triche et les gens finissent par deviner qu'on n'est pas honnête avec eux. Donc, c'est le gros défi que nous avons comme chercheurs et comme décideurs. Dans mon rôle, c'est aussi un défi avec mes collègues autour du cabinet. Tous ne sont pas des universitaires ou des académiques de formation et tous n'ont pas non plus le même appétit que moi pour les détails. Donc, j'ai besoin de me discipliner des fois, de dire, bon, c'est compliqué, je vais essayer de le dire simplement. Et je pense que c'est la même chose pour les Canadiens. On doit tout faire pour leur donner des connaissances claires, 2, être positif envers le futur, et 3, démontrer comment on peut être positif envers le futur. Pourquoi? Les connaissances, les gens en ont besoin. Le positivisme, l'optimisme par rapport au futur, on a aussi besoin de ça. J'y reviendrai peut-être dans quelques instants. Et les mesures, parce que les gens ne veulent pas juste entendre parler d'objectifs et de cibles. S'ils veulent éviter d'être cyniques envers les élus, envers les experts comme nous sommes, ben, on doit aussi sentir qu'il y a des choses qui bougent. Si je peux revenir brièvement là, sur la question, c'était laquelle? Non, l'optimisme, c'est ça. Ouais, l'optimisme. C'est difficile d'être optimiste. Hein. Quand on est comme nous, on voit tous les problèmes, tous les défis, tous les risques, les futures pandémies, la crise climatique, la crise du coût de la vie que les gens vivent, et particulièrement les gens qui ont moins de moyens subissent à tous les jours. C'est difficile d'être optimiste. Mais il faut être optimiste. Parce que sans optimisme, on perd beaucoup de notre énergie. Et on a besoin de l'énergie de tout le monde. Alors, comment on fait pour rester optimiste, même si on voit tous les défis? Ben, à nouveau, la science est une bonne façon d'être optimiste en faisant valoir toutes les contributions de la science au développement économique, social et environnemental du pays. Et quand on le fait, les gens deviennent plus lumineux et donc plus facilement engagés vers le progrès.
You've spoken about evidence and about information and misinformation, and it would be helpful if you could talk about how do you think the Academy can help the government address these issues? What role can we have to support government's agenda to improve healthcare for Canadians and to combat disinformation and misinformation?
The Academy has already done so in a number of different contexts, many different contexts over the last decades. It has also done so recently on I'm told on diabetes, dementia, autism, and I think the Academy is also focused on how we can support and how we should support and how we have to support healthcare workers in the context of repairing the damage that COVID-19 has made to our healthcare system and therefore our healthcare workers, and preparing that system and our healthcare workers for the future. Because again, the clouds, there are clouds on the horizon. Just on dementia, on which you have worked, we know that between now and 2030, the number of people in Canada living with dementia will have doubled, from about 600,000 now to about 1 million in 2030. The doubling of the population of dementia, that is very significant, obviously, for healthcare workers, clearly, but also for their caregivers, their families, their friends, and for themselves. And that's, we're in 2022, 2023, 2030 is almost tomorrow. So that's an example of how your work as academicians and within the Academy can help bring governments in the right direction and at the right speed. Now, it's sometimes difficult to find both the right direction and to go at the right speed to that direction, given that there is uncertainty as to which direction we need to go. And to be honest to you, and I hope no one in Health Canada listens, even though my department may have 20,000 workers, I'm not convinced that they have all of the expertise to drive that agenda to the right place at the right speed, because they're so busy with many other things, many of them dealing with urgencies, emergencies, the stakeholder relationship with working with other governments. They're so busy trying to extinguish fires that sometimes it's difficult for them to focus on those longer term things that are coming to us. So your role as researchers, academicians, experts, your role and your ability can make a big difference. And by the way, may I add that you, I think, underestimate your influence. And I used to do that too with Marie-France. I used to believe that no one would listen to, would read my research papers, no one would ever look to us when we were going to conferences, never listen to our seminars, but that's not true. There are all sorts of spies looking at you, and you wouldn't know how much of that spying work has an influence inside the government. Obviously, in ways that cannot be visible to you, because much of that is hidden from your view, but you do have a big impact, and you're responsible for that impact. Unfortunately, you have this burden of helping big governments go in the right direction, and sometimes at a very accelerated speed.
Plusieurs membres de l'Académie sont bien impliqués en santé mondiale. Et puis, M. Martin le faisait remarquer tout à l'heure, la pandémie a démontré à tout le moins la population canadienne, ce qui a toujours été, c'est l'interdépendance avec les autres pays au niveau du globe. On aimerait savoir quelles sont les priorités de votre gouvernement en santé mondiale, puis si vous pourriez nous donner quelques exemples de comment ces priorités-là s'articulent.
Je dirais que les priorités du gouvernement canadien sont assez bien alignées avec les priorités des grandes organisations mondiales comme l'OMS, les Nations Unies, le PNUD, les pays du G7 et du G20. Juste pour vous résumer rapidement à quoi ressemblent ces priorités, j'étais en Allemagne en mai pour les réunions des ministres de la Santé du G7. J'étais un peu plus tard à Genève pour une assemblée de l'OMS. 3 grandes priorités. La première, c'est la lutte contre les urgences de santé publique comme la COVID-19 qui continue, comme on sait, et les autres types d'urgences qui n'arrêtent pas de se présenter. La deuxième priorité mondiale, du moins dans les organismes auxquels le gouvernement canadien participe davantage, c'est la résistance antimicrobienne. que l'on sait être un gros problème, mais caché de la plupart des gens. On pense que dans les 10 à 15 prochaines années, le nombre de décès reliés à la résistance antimicrobienne va avoir été multiplié par 10. Mais ça, c'est parce qu'il y aura aussi d'autres impacts que juste les décès. Il y aura beaucoup de gens qui vont se retrouver à l'hôpital avec des séquelles importantes parce qu'on n'aura pas eu les bons traitements pour prendre soin d'eux, là. Et la troisième priorité, c'est l'impact de la crise climatique sur la santé de l'environnement, évidemment, et la santé humaine aussi. Alors, ces trois-là, bien évidemment, ça va ensemble, hein. Les épidémies, les pandémies, le développement plus difficile de traitements et de vaccins et autres contre les maladies de plus en plus répandues et l'impact de la crise climatique sur tout ça. Donc, tout ça, c'est relié et ça fait en sorte que le gouvernement canadien investit beaucoup de ses ressources, évidemment en appui à des ressources souvent plus significatives de notre voisin américain et de l'Union européenne dans ces thèmes. Et on travaille ensemble sur ces trois thèmes. Maintenant, en plus de ça, évidemment, le gouvernement canadien a aussi un agenda de réduire les inéquités, entre autres par une politique internationale qui est très féministe, parce que les inéquités dans beaucoup de pays dans le monde sont générées et sont le produit, la conséquence aussi d'inéquité de genre. Alors, c'est notre agenda en matière d'éducation, en matière de santé, évidemment, en matière d'inclusion, en matière de respect des droits, en matière d'accès à des soins de santé de base, mais tourne beaucoup autour de l'agenda filles et femmes, parce que c'est là qu'on pense que les ressources ont souvent le plus grand impact. Alors ça, c'est un agenda de développement international qui complète l'agenda plus santé publique. Et évidemment, bien, on essaie de faire ce qu'on peut pour traiter de la géopolitique. Parce que la géopolitique crée aussi beaucoup de la géopolitique compliquée que l'on connaît dans le monde, en Ukraine évidemment, mais dans beaucoup d'autres endroits sur la planète. On sait que les famines, les mouvements de population, les crises de santé publique sont souvent générées par des guerres ou par des conflits. Alors, si le Canada peut continuer à jouer un rôle de prévention et d'atténuation des conflits armés et des guerres, ben on sait qu'on aura un impact aussi sur la santé définie assez largement. Et je terminerai là-dessus pour parler un peu plus de l'Ukraine. Quand j'étais à Genève, bon, j'ai eu la chance de rencontrer le ministre de la Santé de l'Ukraine qui m'expliquait très clairement, et dans des termes très crus, que je ne vais pas essayer de résumer ici. Il me disait très clairement de quelle manière un conflit armé comme a lieu ici, comme il a lieu en Ukraine présentement, a des impacts terribles sur la santé des populations, évidemment la santé des gens qui sont sur la ligne de front, hommes et femmes inclus, mais sur tous les travailleurs de la santé qui sont autour, qui sont impactés, qui n'ont pas accès aux médicaments, n'ont pas accès aux équipements, n'ont pas accès aux technologies d'information qui leur permettraient de bien traiter ceux qui souffrent du conflit. Alors, c'est la géopolitique est un autre facteur sur lequel le gouvernement canadien peut aider à avoir une influence positive.
On peut passer aux questions de la salle.
I think we have time for one quick. I'm getting told one quick question from the floor. Gilles, I see a hand there. Yes, Serge has a microphone.
OK, merci beaucoup. OK, mon nom est Gilles Lavigne, je suis un dentiste-chercheur. Merci beaucoup d'être avec nous. J'aimerais vous entendre sur un phénomène que je vois, je suis aussi clinicien en douleur. Les patients, qui sont des individus, nous demandent de plus en plus d'être moins paternalistes et maternalistes. Ils nous demandent depuis la COVID, ils ont été inondés d'informations. Ils sont tous devenus des mini-PhD. Et là, maintenant, ils veulent négocier, ce qui est tout à fait normal. Avec le patient partenaire, on est très heureux de ça. Mais Je serais curieux de vous entendre comment on peut capitaliser, comment on peut profiter de ce momentum. On parle toujours, les fake news, les méchants. Mais c'est pas tout le monde, là. Il y a des gens qui sont devenus très, 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 très médicaux, santé, prévention, conscients. Okay. How can we improve this momentum?
3 choses, en commençant par vous, étant de la profession de la dentisterie. Tout à l'heure, on me demandait de quelle manière l'Académie peut-elle aider à une meilleure santé humaine. Donc, vous connaissez un peu l'agenda qui est en train d'avoir cours. Donc, on a besoin de vous, des chercheurs comme vous, entre autres, et tous ceux qui travaillent sur cette capacité de travailler sur l'importance d'une bonne santé bucco-dentaire et donc de bons soins à la fois préventifs, de diagnostic et aussi de traitement. Alors, on est en train de vivre, on va vivre prochainement, une expérience naturelle rare. Il va y avoir au Canada un nombre important, en commençant par les enfants de 0 à 11 ans, qui vont avoir accès à des soins de santé bucco-dentaires plus importants. Donc, c'est une expérience naturelle parce qu'on va pouvoir comparer avec les techniques qu'on connaît ce qu'il y avait avant, ce qu'il y a pendant et ce qui aura lieu plus tard. Donc, travaillons ensemble, puis on a besoin de vous pour anticiper quel genre de données on va avoir besoin dans quelques années pour pouvoir faire l'évaluation de cette expérience naturelle. La deuxième chose, sur les données auxquelles les gens ont maintenant accès, c'est un autre exemple d'un impact positif de la COVID-19. Les gens s'intéressent à la santé et les déterminants de la santé. Ça vient avec des défis, j'imagine, parce que vous avez dit paternaliste et maternaliste. Peut-être plus facile dans une relation clinicienne, une relation clinique, d'avoir un rôle plus informé que l'autre, mais là, on est à un niveau, pas évidemment identique, mais la relation change un petit peu. Mais là, c'est une bonne nouvelle en troisième lieu, c'est une très bonne nouvelle, comme vous l'avez dit, parce que ça mène à ce qu'on appelle en français, je pense, une plus grande agencivité, une plus grande capacité d'autonomisation du patient et des patients. Et ça, c'est en recherche, là, y compris pour les instituts de recherche de santé du Canada, pour les IRSC, CIHR en anglais. Pour les IRSC, c'est une approche là, davantage orientée sur les conditions, les besoins et l'expérience patient. C'est une approche qui est très prometteuse et qu'on encourage beaucoup avec les IRSC. Donc, il y a une capacité de travailler là-dessus, à la fois pour augmenter l'autonomie, l'agencivité des gens et augmenter donc leur bien-être défini de façon assez large, et aussi pour améliorer la relation entre les fournisseurs et le patient, et je pense augmenter aussi la qualité et la pertinence de la recherche qui est faite par la suite. Parce que l'expérience patient, même si c'est un peu plus qualitative que les outils quantitatifs qu'on utilise généralement, l'expérience patient peut aider beaucoup la recherche scientifique, y compris évidemment en sciences de la santé.
Well, with that, just to keep us roughly on time, I want to thank very much Minister Duclos for spending time with us and sharing your thoughts, and to Marie-France and Siobhan for hosting this conversation. All right, a few just closing remarks. Amongst the dignitaries that we have in the room, we've spotted another one, and at the back of the room is past president, Paul Allison. Paul, please raise your hand or stand up. And specifically, so Paul is in the Faculty of Dentistry at McGill University, and importantly was chair or co-chair of an assessment that the Academy did several years ago related to dental care. And if we wonder about the impact of the work that the Academy does, you would have seen an announcement from the federal government about dental care increasing access for people in poverty. And that really falls along very much from the work that Paul and his committee did on the assessment. So we do make a difference. Housekeeping thing is that after my remarks, you're free. We invite all new fellows who've been inducted this evening to just meet outside and pose with the minister for a group photograph, and we look forward to that. as well. And then following that, follow the stairs upstairs, and please join us for a reception in La Pavillon Rossi, which is upstairs. It's a beautiful glass-lined room on the second floor. Just a few closing thoughts here. When we organized this event, sometimes these induction ceremonies are fellows talking to fellows, and we pat each other in the back, and we enjoy some nice wine and things like that. And we wanted to sort of change the model specifically with this event in here, and having outside speakers contribute to and give us some feedback on what we do. And I've heard some really incredible messages that resonated across the comments from Senator Kuchar, from Right Honorable Paul Martin, and now Minister Duclos. And here's what I heard. Incredible calls to action, statements that our impact as an academy is not only valued, but it is needed. And there's much more that we can do. These very polite invitations to contribute more that we heard from all of our speakers. Some of the really big challenges beyond what we're facing in the pandemic that I heard that I think are important. Many people sort of use the terms planetary health, not just human health, animal health, but the health of our environment and the interconnections between them. Climate change as a growing threat to health of our planet, to health of people, and particularly underprivileged and people who are already under threat. And inequality and access to care, and inequality in health outcomes. And of course, these aren't just really sort of simple unidimensional problems. They're problems that intersect across different issues. And the value of the academy, I say proudly, we have social scientists, we've got surgeons, we've got public health officials, animal health people, nurses, dentists, etc. We work at the intersections of these, and we get along because we appreciate each other in that. So let's take up the challenge to address these really, really large problems. The other thing that I heard is the incredible value, the importance of independent advice, the independent interpretation of science, as long as we have credibility amongst society and people within government who want to listen. And also, I would say, independent advice in reviewing where we've come. So for example, as provinces and the federal government and countries around the world reflect on, did we do the right things during COVID with respect to communicating data in real time when the information was changing and new strains were emerging? I think there is a role for the academy as independent voices if we have the credibility to do so. The last thing I would say, and it's a call particularly to our new fellows, but also to the 800 plus fellows that were already inducted in the years past, we have incredible individual talent. And we also have in this country incredible experience in working together, a message that former Prime Minister Martin left us with. So, and that may be unique in the world is what I heard him say. So let's take up those, let's feel proud about who we are as individuals. Let's feel proud about who we are as an academy, and let's boldly go out and make a difference in the world. Minister Duclos, you made comments in French, and I will paraphrase them in English. You said, it's hard to be optimistic sometimes, but we must be optimistic. And Mr. Martin said that we should be optimistic given who we are as Canadians, who we are in health scientists. And so with that, let's go celebrate, all of us. Thank you all for your time.